Welcome to Certainty for Uncertain Times. My name is Lauren, and the entire goal behind my channel is to help you navigate through the chaos, the clown world, and the dumpster fire that we all find ourselves living in these days through the lens of the Bible, but also while connecting the most crucial dots to Bible prophecy. Now, if you're looking to dive a little bit deeper into the Bible's prophetic puzzle pieces, then guess what? You are so in the right place, and I'm going to invite you to like this video, subscribe to this channel, and of course hit that notification bell so that you don't miss out on any future uploads coming from me. Well, a couple of weeks ago, I had the most awesome opportunity to appear on Pastor/Dr. JB Hixson's podcast, Not By Works Ministries, and I know a lot of you on this channel are very familiar with JB and his work, and it was such a great time. He asked me, of course, to share a little bit about my testimony and how I kind of got into creating this channel, along with, of course, us talking about conspiracies and all the ways that the enemy is at work in today's world and how this really relates to the fact that we are living in the most incredible time, the time when Jesus is getting ready to return for his church. And of course, we're seeing the stack up of all the events of the tribulation kind of foreshadowing what's happening in our world right now. So today, I want to give you a chance to see that interview if you haven't had an opportunity to watch it on JB's platforms. So let's get into it now.
Well, Lauren, thanks so much for joining us for the program today. Glad to have you along.
Wow, thank you so much for having me, JB. It's honestly, it's kind of like I have a little bit of starstruckness with all of the connectedness I'm getting with pastors like yourself, just because you guys have all changed my life so much. So thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to come on here.
Oh, it's totally my pleasure. And I know how you feel. I mean, over the years, as you know, as I kind of got some traction and started writing and speaking and so forth, I found myself talking with some of the people that I had admired from afar that didn't know me from Adam forever. And it is a bit awe-inspiring to think, wow, thank you, Lord, for the chance to meet these people. But I feel the same way about you. I had a great time on your show. It's been, a month or so now. But man, you're one of the good guys out there. You know what you're doing, and we had a great discussion. So why don't we start with, tell us a little bit about Certainty for Uncertain Times and kind of how you got interested in Bible prophecy and conspiracies and that stuff.
Awesome. Well, the first thing I think people should know if they don't is I have grown up in the church all of my life, but my parents raised me. My dad actually was Church of Christ for many years. So obviously he had like an amillennial background. And then he and my mom got married and they kind of like left the Church of Christ and went into more of a Christian church. And so that denomination was also amillennial. But my parents were going to a church here locally when we moved to Missouri, and Dr. David Reagan came and did a prophecy night at their local church, and it was a Christian church. And my dad had already at the time been just kind of wrestling with Old Testament prophecy that he just knew could not be explained away, right? That there was just true legitimacy to, hey, these events have never happened. And so Dr. David Reagan is actually who helped my mom and dad come out. Well, my mom was always pre-trib because her dad was. Her dad is the one that I was telling you about on the podcast that had the Schofield Bible. So anyway, my dad and mom kind of walked away from that, and then they started bringing prophecy into their local church as well. And so I remember at one time, I think I was probably, I don't know, I had to be 12 or 13. My parents were doing like a small group study, and it was a pre-trib study with Lamb and Lion Ministries. It was all Dr. David Reagan stuff, and people were flipping out in the church because it was an amillennial church. So, so that's kind of like I grew up with it, but I was too young to really appreciate it. And then second to that, I don't know if there were a lot of things going on at that time just because, again, I was young. So fast forward quite a few years. I've always been very political. At one point, I thought I was going to enter into politics, just personality wise and just being willing to die on a hill and be a bold voice. And I was always the girl like arguing with teachers in school when they were trying to, I remember getting into an argument in my sophomore class about abortion, and my teacher decided to embarrass me in front of the entire class, and I didn't know enough then. So now I wish I could go back and relive that moment because I would just absolutely put him in his place with what I know now. But it was things like that that really just spurred me on to continue to seek after the truth of the word, to equip myself, to have an answer, to have a reason. And so I stayed really involved in the political realm. I was definitely one of those that would share things, online to start conversation, to be able to have more conversation. But I guess it was probably around I want to say 2015, 2016. I just was like, I am so over this. I started to just kind of figure out like, it just felt like I would always get mad watching something on TV and I'm going, why didn't so and so say this? Why didn't they address this issue? It's like, it was like a playbook. Like it was just, everything is scripted. And so I bowed out of everything and just kind of was just like, I would say if you had to label me, I just really became more of a libertarian if we had to put a label on it. Obviously still held to my, my biblical values, but as far as just caring about any of it, I was just like, whatever, it just doesn't matter. Well, then 2020 happened. And like most people, that's when things became very clear. Because it didn't take long when we started hearing all this nonsense about this shutdown that was coming and all of these things. And my husband and I are looking at each other going, something is not, it's not right here. All the churches are starting to shut down. So then my mother-in-law actually had sent me she sent me a message from a pastor down in Florida where Lance and I were living at the time. He's about an hour north of us. And he started going into all the details of the Luciferian conspiracy. And that for me, it was just like something in my spirit resonated like, hey kid, this is what this is really about. So that started to spur more just digging, more research. And I did happen to get into the 17 letter movement for a little while, right? And just kind of was trying to put together pieces. And that actually broadened my understanding of even just learning about the Luciferian conspiracy, not quite understanding what a psyop that really was, but it did help me to open a lot of doors. And then again, time is all relative. I feel like I've lived like 9 lives since 2020 because of the way time has gone. But at some point, I think it might have been even June of 2020 or June of 2021, the Abraham Accords happened. And I knew at that moment there's got to be a pastor talking about that because I didn't know about you. I knew about Dr. David Reagan, but it didn't like connect the dots on how to search for that. I didn't know about Lee. I didn't know about any of you guys. And so I decided to just Google something. And James Cadiz, he's a Calvary Chapel pastor out of California, Signal Hill. He had Andy Woods on his show and they were talking about the Abraham Accords. And that was what dove me back into Bible prophecy. And I remember even asking people that, I knew, I was like, do you think Israel has anything to do? Like, does what's going on in Israel matter? And, I had friends who were amillennial and they were like, no, none of that matters. And there was a check in my spirit about that. Like, that can't be right. So it was just kind of 2020 that really opened my eyes to a lot of things and got me on the quest for not just, not like the truth or movement, but like absolute biblical truth. And then, of course, lo and behold, it was your podcast, your books that really helped connect the dots from a biblical worldview to all aspects of the Luciferian conspiracy, understanding that it is premillennialism, it is dispensationalism, it is a pre-trib rapture. There is a really dark, sinister plan going on that a lot of Christians are very unaware of, and they're only seeing one side of it. And so that's kind of really where it like stemmed from. And so then I just felt the Lord calling me to like fire up a channel. Prior to 2020, I did have a beauty channel on YouTube where I taught women how to do hair and makeup. I'm all self-taught. And I think all of that was like grooming, if you will, to get me very comfortable on camera to be able to do what God has called me to now, which is really where my heart and passion is. Because when 2020 happened and I saw what was even happening to conservative women that were like, with Sephora and Ulta and all of that, I was like, I can't even shop at these places anymore. They hate people like me. And so I just disconnected from all of that completely. And then the Lord started to shift all of it to where it is now. And so I launched Certainty for Uncertain Times, I think about a year ago, a little over a year ago, and started to get really serious about it. Just starting to like put out more content over the last, again, time's all relative. So I'm probably giving incorrect timelines here, but not too long ago, it was just like, I have to get serious about this because I feel like time is of the essence with where we're headed now. So that's kind of in a nutshell how it kind of all came to be.
Yeah, I tell you, it's funny. I love the name, by the way, Certainty for Uncertain
Thank you.
Times. Proverbs 22:21 says that I may make you know the certainty of the words of truth, that you may answer words of truth to those who send to you. Great verse that I've memorized a long time ago. So a couple of thoughts here. First of all, yeah, Dave Reagan and Lamb and Lion have really awakened a lot of people to Bible prophecy, and especially in that sort of Christian or Church of Christ type world, which is good because they also need to be awakened to grace and the fact that we don't earn our way into heaven or perform our way into heaven. So,
Hmm.
yeah, I really appreciate that. In fact, I was just last weekend with Dr. Nathan Jones from Lamb and Lion Ministries at a conference and love those guys dearly. Been on their program many times, been in their studio out there in Texas. So praise
Hmm.
God for using Dave in your life to kind of start you on this journey. Might also mention that if you ever change your mind about politics, man, you got my vote. Let me tell you. And I don't even like voting that much because it's such a
I
waste
know.
of time. But yeah, I'd vote for you. So just keep that in mind if you decide to throw your hat in the ring here at the end. Uh,
Perfect.
do you remember the name of the pastor in Florida that was about an hour north of you by any chance?
It's been so long. I
Yeah,
really, yeah, no. And the thing is, like, I've obviously been inundated with so much information,
yeah,
from, that time frame. But for Lance and I, uh, we had been going to more mega church models, right? Sitting under pastors that did not teach expositorily, that taught like 7 ways to be happy. They take one scripture and they're going to make a 17-week series on
yeah,
that scripture. So
yeah.
2020 even opened up our eyes to, expository teaching. That's probably the way that we should be learning the word. And it's just like all these years I had been a Christian, and it wasn't until the last, what are we at, 4 years now into this, the amount of Bible knowledge that I have from pastors like Gary Hamrick. He's one of my favorites. He's a Calvary Chapel guy up in Virginia. Jack Hibbs, and cool enough to know, I just found out from a couple of friends, we now have a Jack Hibbs hub here in my local town, which is crazy because it's JB. It's hard to even find like remnant churches around here. Like we
Mm-hmm.
do a lot of online stuff because the closest churches to us that align with all of the values, that are important to us biblically, I should say doctrine. The doctrines, they're an hour away from where we are. It's like those things have been very frustrating, and they really produce this like we're alone in this type of mentality. And so I'm so thankful for technology because it has bridged that gap. So,
Yeah, and by the way, a bunch of Bible prophecy gurus are going to be invading southern Missouri in December at Branson for the Prophecy Watchers conference. So I don't know if you'll be.
yes, I'll be there.
Oh, good, good,
I
good.
will be
Great.
there. Yes.
Yeah.
All the guys that I can't wait to meet are going to be there. LA Marzulli was at so we have a local Calvary Chapel here in Washington, Missouri, and he came to our Calvary Chapel. I guess that was back in 2022 in June. I really wish I would have went up and met LA, but it was just such a chaotic weekend. But he was there, and it was so neat to have a pastor have somebody like LA Marzulli come into the church,
Yes. Yep.
because it's most people were just shocked at the stuff he was talking about, and Lance and I were sitting there nodding our head and clapping and amening because we had already been in this. We'd been in this trench for so long already, learning about all the truth of the things that the hidden history, if you will, that no one really knows.
Yep. Yeah, no, they don't. Yeah, LA will be in Colorado in November up at Fort
Mhm.
Collins, hosted by Solid Bread, the same ministry that just hosted the conference this weekend. So, but yeah, so it's neat to hear your journey. 2020, of course, as you said, woke a lot of people up. But what's
Mhm.
interesting to me, Lauren, is here we are 4 years later, and it seems like most people in the church, especially, have sort of been lulled back into a state of
Mhm.
complacency, and it really bothers me because I think, I mean, that was a game changer. That was kind of like 20 years before that. 9/11 was a game changer,
Yep.
and it seems like only a small percentage of Christians really recognize what happened before our very eyes in 2020 with our freedoms being taken away and
Yeah.
setting the stage. So why do you think so many Christians are content to just move on like there was nothing to see there?
Well, I think it's a myriad of things, honestly. I think the first thing is that unfortunately, a lot of our collective Big C church these days, they don't do a great job of discipling the butts in the pews, or the butts in the seats every week. So unfortunately, when they are talking about current events, they're really tippy-toeing around things so that, I think some churches are afraid of losing their 501c3 status. I think that's part of it. And I think a lot of pastors, honestly, JB, because they're not operating out of like the full counsel of God, that Bible prophecy is left out, and it's depending on who you talk to, 1/3, 1/4 of the Bible is prophetic in nature. And this is what I have really appreciated about all of people like yourself and some of the guys that I've mentioned on here that I've been following and learning under for a long time. They're not afraid to be bold from the pulpit, and their congregations are also learning, like they're walking through the book of Exodus from start to finish. And if it takes them a year to get through it, well, at least everybody's going to know what the purpose of that book was about. I mean, there's so much for myself I didn't even understand or know about the Old Testament prior to that. And we were also just kind of taught that the Old Testament was just, just put it by the wayside. It's only the New Testament that matters. And then the other part that I think is that, unfortunately, I don't think a lot of people understand the deepest, darkest corners of the agenda, which is what you spend so much of your time bringing to the forefront, which is the true Luciferian agenda that's at play. And I feel like that's where I personally feel like I'm in a rock and a hard place, because some of the things that I have to say about all this are not popular right now. And, and it's just the way that it is. But it's, I say the statement all the time. Once you see these things, once you put the puzzle pieces together or connect the dots, you can't unsee that. It's kind of the same thing that happened in 2020 for us when we started to realize that this was an agenda at play. This was not about protecting people. This was not about, all the things that the narrative was in play for. This was about freedom. This was about seeing what can we take from all of these people and keep, so that when we roll out our real big plan, they just fall for it hook, line, and sinker. It's about depopulation. It's about all these things. And so when you see that, you cannot go back to the old pieces of the narrative that are being talked about over and over and over again without just rolling your eyes and just wanting to scream and yell, because that's not what's going on. So that's kind of how I feel like things are going now. And I will say, to piggyback off that, the other thing that I think has happened is that I watched this happen in 2022. Do you remember in 2022, everybody was talking about this giant red wave that was going to happen in November? It was going to be a red wave and everybody's talking about it. And all I could think of was, no, it's not. It is not. The Luciferians are not going to allow that to happen. So sure enough, November rolls around and it was a purple wave after that. And what killed me about that is I literally saw outcomes of elections where you would have some crazy left-wing progressive that won a seat somewhere, and then you would have a right-wing person win in the same state, both of which are opposing in every possible thing. And it makes no sense to have like a senator and then have somebody in a different seat. And that, like, it didn't make any sense. And so I think what happened at that juncture is that Christians were like, or even honestly, just not even just Christians, but people that are patriots, whatever you want to say, they were like, we won some things. And then they just like, we could breathe again. Instead
Mhm.
of actually realizing what was at play, that was planned. Like they gave away the things they were willing to give away. Does that make sense?
Yeah, controlled opposition. I mean, that's
Mhm.
their MO all along, goes way back centuries, and
Yep.
Satan's puppets on earth and using that to try to control people on earth. Um, yeah, I'm reminded of that Leonardo da Vinci quote that I have at the beginning of my first volume of that Spirit series. There are those who see, there are those who see when they are shown, and there are those who will never see. And I
Hmm.
think we can kind of think of people in each of those categories coming out of the pandemic. There were certainly those who recognized there was more at play here than
Yep.
they thought. There were others that bought it hook, line, and sinker. And then there were those who bought it at first, but when you begin to point out the anomalies, and especially when the data started to come to the fore of the VAERS data and that vaccine injury and all kinds of other things, reputable doctors coming out speaking out against it, then those people, when they were shown, started to come awake. But even still, Lauren, I think, as you said, so many people might recognize that there are evil forces at play, that things are not always as they appear, but they seldom go all the way to the top biblically and
Hmm.
understand this is a cosmic battle. They're going to blame it on the left, or blame it on the Democrats, or blame it on, whoever, the deep state or whatever.
Yep.
Um, George Soros is the real problem, or Bill Gates is the real problem. And they are problems, make no doubt about it. They're all pawns in the game. But until we look at all of life through the lens of Scripture and see God's plan of the ages really coming to fruition here and climaxing with this final 7-year battle that the Bible talks about, we're not going to really ever awake fully. We're sort of awake, a lot of people, but they're not eyes wide open just yet. I want to go back to what you said about amillennialism, just to make sure. I know we've got a large audience, a lot of people that may or may not know some of these terms that you and
Hmm.
I have become familiar with. Of course, is a negative. If you put before something, it just means the opposite. So an atheist is someone who believes there's no God. And so an amillennialist believes there's no millennium. The millennium is a term that comes straight out of Revelation 20. It refers to that 1,000-year reign of Christ on the old earth when he comes back triumphantly at the end of that 7-year tribulation. So a person who's an amillennialist really has no use for end times prophecy because they don't think there's going to be a literal earthly reign of Christ. And a lot of things kind of trickle down from that. So therefore, they don't believe Israel is important. They don't believe there's a future for national Israel. They think the church is the kingdom. It's sort of this kingdom now concept. So there are a lot of problems with that view that come from not taking the Bible verse by verse at its word. So let's talk about kind of your take on where we are. We're less than 6 weeks away from the election. It's a theater. I mean, it really is. There's just craziness all over the place. What's your gut telling you about where we're headed? I'm not asking you to be a prophetess here, but
I'm not one.
you're not one. Thank you. Yeah,
No.
me neither. And by the way, if you claim to be a prophetess, I probably wouldn't have you on the show.
I understand. I understand.
But I think you have your finger on the pulse of a lot of the stuff. You talk to a lot of guests. Where are we headed?
I will tell you, I'm having the hardest time figuring that out because I feel like whenever I started to understand the true agenda that, it's you got a bird and they have the same feathers on each side, right? Um, Trump's been the hard one for me to really figure out like where he fits in that paradigm. It's obvious to see that the other side is very controlled. I mean, there's so many times I even look at like the videos of Joe Biden up and I go, is that the same guy they had in the video 2 weeks ago? He looks different, so those things are like really those are kind of obvious, but it's so hard because I think what it is that as you've talked about and several other people that, we know kind of in this realm talk about, there's so many tentacles to the Luciferian agenda or to the Satan's control. They're all fighting for something because the New World Order looks different with China. It looks different, with the Russia. It looks different. They all have a version of it. So at any rate, I don't know. I was really shocked whenever Kamala became the gal that is on the ticket like that. I didn't know what to do with that because I honestly thought if they were going to replace Biden, they were going to put somebody crazy in there like Newsom. And that was just going to be, he's the guy, or even, Barry Obama's wife. I thought it would be something like that. I don't know. And so when Kamala, she had the nomination without even getting the nomination, that was all weird how that happened. I really had a hard time. And then we've had all these situations where, Trump's life has been almost, taken from him a couple different times. And so I'm trying to just figure out like who do the globalists want in? I really cannot, I don't feel like I can definitively answer that right now. I
Yeah.
still feel like to some degree that it's going to be Trump because I have this, and I did a video about this on my channel not too long ago about him being more of a front man for the light side of the world order. So because everybody's rejecting this really sinister, dark stuff that we're seeing. I mean, look at what's coming out with Diddy right now. Like everybody's hoping that he's going to roll on every person that's involved in all of this, and I don't see that happening either. They only let you know who they want to let you know of, right? You're not going to roll on everybody. But everyone is railing against that. Everyone's railing against Klaus Schwab. Everyone, even railing with things going on at the UN. Nobody wants that. But if you bring somebody in there, and this is such classic Hegelian dialectic, but if you bring somebody in there that is kind of like the middle of the road, or that believes in some of the same things but uses different terminology, then we can get it done that way. Now, what I can't figure out is how involved Trump is with his knowledge of that. That's the part that's hard because the patriot inside of me, every time I see somebody with a Trump hat or every time I see somebody, we had people come into the restaurant this week trying to give no tax on tips, little pins to all of us as servers. Stuff like that makes me smile because I feel like those are my people, because for a long time you feel so alone whenever it sounds like the entire nation is against anybody who is conservative or has moral values or anything like that. And then you find all these people, they got flags on the back of their trucks driving down the road. Like my heart kind of smiles when I see stuff like that because there's a unity there, right? You see that. And so it's just difficult. And like I told you before, obviously that realm of it's all going to lead to the same place, but that sounds a lot better to me than the blatant way that the Democratic side is going. But I truly, again, I'm not a prophet, but I really don't know. I don't know how this is going to pan out. I
Yeah,
really don't.
it really is intriguing because I think so many things are coming to a head at once. We're going to come back in a minute and talk about the UN, but
Yeah.
first of all, yeah, I like what Joel Skousen has always said about the Democrat Republican. It's likely that almost all Democrats are completely controlled, and
Hmm.
most Republicans, but not all. So we
Yes.
do have that brand of controlled opposition where it's sort of a hands-off controlling, where they sort of let them speak their mind and they're legitimate, patriotic, God-fearing people trying to make a
Hmm.
difference in this world, and they'll let them alone for a while because they know ultimately they control the outcome anyway. So it kind of
Yeah.
makes us feel like we have a voice. But speaking of Trump, I feel like if he was sort of all in with a biblical worldview and a conservative worldview, and even awake to the deep state as he claimed to be. Remember, he postured himself back in 2016 as sort of the antithesis of the deep state,
Right.
but it's quite evident that he's not fully awake to all that. But boy, if he was, I mean, he would definitely be the kind of guy you'd want on your side. I mean, he's a take no prisoners. He just speaks
Yeah.
his mind. He of course gets himself in trouble for that, but we do resonate with a lot of what he says. But it's so self-evident to anybody that is truly honest and objective that clearly he's got some issues that align him with the globalists like Elon
Yep.
Musk and
Hmm.
others. And he's got some issues on the right to life. He's got some issues on Israel and the land. He's got some, issues on all kinds of things. And so, but again, there's no perfect candidate. We totally get that, and I agree that he's a guy that, at least in some ways, reflects our worldview. But I just don't know whether we can trust him. Um,
Right.
I mean, you can only use that excuse so many times that, well, he just listened to the wrong advisors. Well, okay, he listened to the wrong advisors, and 35 million people died because of the gene altering bioinjection, according to a Netherlands study that just came out. I mean, there are mistakes, and then there are pretty big mistakes, right? And so
Hmm.
I'm for as gracious and forgiving as everybody, but do we really want, you know, to risk that kind of a mistake again, especially when we've gotten no indication that he's acknowledged that mistake?
Well,
So,
that's the thing for me too. That's been a struggle. Like he's still very proud of that,
mhm.
and that's tough because I know I got censored for talking about this kind of stuff not too long ago. It affected the business that my husband and I have. Like social media has not been kind to us. The tech overlords do not like us.
No.
So those kinds of things are really hard. And then you have like, I believe it's Ivanka. Didn't she graduate from the World Economic Forum
Oh, no
school?
question. Jared and a bunch of the
Yeah.
Trump
Oh, yeah.
clan is very tight with the World Economic Forum.
Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, there's no question there's some questionable ties there. But again, we don't know what we don't know. And
Nope.
and like you, I don't know what's going to happen. And I mean, if we are forced to choose Coke or Pepsi, I suppose I'd choose Coke, in this case, Trump.
Absolutely. Yep.
I get that. I totally respect that. Um, but I wish it wasn't a forced choice. But here's, as you were kind of walking through and trying to sort of predict, hey, what's going on? I'm in the same boat. I'm like, it's really confusing to me. And one thought that occurred to me recently, Lauren, I'd love to get your take on it, is maybe because I believe we are heading towards the very end of the end. I think we're in the
Yep.
last of the last days. I think we're on the cusp of this end times plan, beginning with the rapture and all the chaos that ensues after that. Because I think we're that close, I wonder if maybe the Luciferians themselves are not in somewhat of a state of confusion and infighting and wrestling for who's going to get to be at the tip of the spear, and who, we know we're getting close to the end, so I want the credit. I mean, they're all a bunch of Satan worshiping, sinful, unredeemed people. So, of course, the manifestations of the flesh are going to be even greater in that category. So maybe the reason we're having trouble figuring out their next move is because maybe they don't know their next move at this point. What do you think?
Well, I think that's a good observation. I think at the end of the day, they all report to Satan, right? So, and he knows his time is short. He's obviously been very clear since May 14th, 1948, that time is running short. But obviously, there's so many things in play right now that I think that's plausible. That's very plausible. And while we all, all of us have these pieces of history that tell us when Jesus was born and crucified, and I think most scholars believe it was somewhere between 30 and 33 AD. Satan was there. He was
Mhm.
there the day that it
Mhm.
happened. So he knows for sure if it was April 3rd, 33 AD. He knows that. He knows the exact date. We don't. So obviously he gets to see that more clearly than we do just because again he was there. But I've wondered that too because it's not just these things that are going on in our Western world that we're all consumed with. Look at all the stuff going on in Israel. Look at all the rabbis that are claiming that they're talking to the Messiah right now. That's crazy. I've seen some of those videos. I mean, they're convinced. They've got even the stuff with like the Temple Mount and the red heifers and all of those things. I mean, those are big pieces of Bible prophecy that we know have to be there during the tribulation. And we're going, well, we sure are seeing a big old shadow being forecasted on, or, a foreshadow over the church age. We're seeing that like crazy. So I think that's plausible. And because, like you stated in several videos and podcasts that I've watched, there's several different tentacles of this agenda. So they're all fighting for some kind of power somewhere. So who knows how it's going to actually all unfold? There's probably a whole lot of confusion going on there.
Yeah, and not only that, but I do think Satan tends to have his plan, and he does tend to give his marching orders. But then, of course,
Mm-hmm.
there are, as we've said, competing agendas and people that are disloyal in the Luciferian elite. But the other thing to remember is Satan is not immutable the way God is. So
Right.
Satan might have his plan, but then if something unpredictable comes up because of some rogue element of the Luciferians, he might change his plan. So he might pivot. So we don't. It's not monolithic by any means, and so. What do you think about these? Speaking of rogue elements, what do you think about these assassination attempts? Is this, a sort of top-down Luciferian Satan himself saying, "Get rid of this guy," or is this some other sort of rogue element trying to take out Trump?
Yeah, see, that's another area where I go, I'm cloudy. Like because, when I first saw the first one happen, I was like, man, so much of this looks really staged to me. Somebody clearly doesn't want him there. But then what happened with this other guy a few weeks ago, I'm going, he's clearly an extremist on the other side. So that's plausible. So there's just so many elements of it that are weird. But I had wondered, like, okay, well, maybe this sector of the Luciferian agenda was trying to take him out, and this sector didn't know about it. Like that's kind of, I don't know. It's
Yeah.
it's so like this is not what I thought we would be seeing. To be really honest, like I did not think it would be this hard to discern truth from lies. And it is. And now with all the technology, we really are having trouble. Like that's why we need the Holy Spirit guiding us every single day to be able to figure out what is actually true and what are we being spoon fed that is absolute deception because it is tough.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, in 1 John 4:1, do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits, because many false prophets have gone out into the world. Very important, but this would be a good time to interject here too. That obviously, to be able to test the spirits presupposes that you have the Spirit of God, which means you've got to
Yep.
be a believer. And so now more than any time, I mean, if you're not a believer, if you've never placed your faith in Jesus Christ, the Son of God, who died and rose again for you personally, as your substitute for sin, then you're a sitting duck. You don't have a chance. I mean, it's just you're going to be like a straw in the wind blowing all over the place. Now, sadly, many believers are too because they're not well grounded. They're catering to the flesh. They're not in Bible teaching churches. But at least you have a fighting chance if you have the Spirit of God, because Jesus says, "Greater is He," or 1 John 4:4 says, "Greater is He who is in you than he who is in the world." But let's make sure you know the Lord. So if you're watching this video and you're not sure if you're going to heaven, listen, you can be absolutely sure. And the only way you can be sure is by doing the one thing Jesus tells you to do, which is believe in me. He says, "Verily, verily, I say unto you, whoever believes in me has everlasting life." So put your trust in the one who died to save you. He's your only hope. Um, but for believers, yeah, it becomes a real quagmire here. I think we just have to kind of watch. On the Trump assassinations, I think, frankly, both of them have some indication that they could be staged. I'm not saying
Mm-hmm.
they were, but
Yep.
there's a lot of anomalies. Joel Skousen has written about this recently, and just weird stuff with the connections of the young guy that they killed with his overseas encrypted accounts, and then this new guy who has all kinds of connections, and in both cases they have cell phone records that they were at or near FBI, headquarters or FBI's outposts. So I don't know. Who knows what to think? But clearly, somebody wants Trump dead, or somebody wants the world to think they want Trump dead. Either way, it's
Yep.
Trump needs to keep his head on a swivel. But the other thing that strikes me as odd is that I mean, this is the first time since 1981 that we've had an assassination attempt, and we've had two, and yet somehow I feel like America is just sort of on information overload or something, because it seems to not stick. It's like it hits the news for a few days and then ho hum, we're moving on to something else. I don't know if it's the fluoride in the water or the chemicals in the air or the pharmaceuticals that everybody's taking, but somehow people just are acting like it was, just another event. And this, in the history of America, it's pretty significant that we live in a day where somebody or some bodies, maybe it's two different groups, we don't know, are trying to take out a former president and current candidate. Your thoughts on any of that?
Yeah, well, I immediately go to the three-letter agencies because we already know how corrupt they all are. I mean, think about the fact that it is now a known fact that our CIA took out John F. Kennedy. Nobody
Mm-hmm.
cares. No one cares. You talk to somebody about that, and it's just like it just water off a duck's back for them. Why is that not a problem for people? And how do we continue to trust these three-letter agencies that are running everything? Like, I don't know. Like that stuff is really hard. So for me, I'm sitting here looking at all this, and you hear the media, well, the FBI is going to investigate this. I don't have any confidence in their ability to do anything. I
Yeah.
have no confidence in any of them. They'll lie whenever they need to, protect whoever they need to. And somebody is pulling the strings above those guys. So, again, just like we said a few minutes ago, they're only going to release the information that they are willing to let go of, that they're willing to have out in the open. The rest of it stays hidden.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, every one of these candidates says, going back decades now, if I'm elected, I will release the JFK files, or I will release the UFO files, or I will release whatever. And then they get in there and they don't do it. And Bill Clinton even admitted when he was president, there is a government inside the government and I don't control it. Well, that's a pretty powerful thing to say. He's not the only one that said that. Many presidents have
Right.
said that. But, it's, the CIA is an end unto itself, and it has been since it was created, coming out of
Mm-hmm.
too. So, yeah, I think people are starting to wake up to the reality that it's a corrupt system and a corrupt government. But somehow, we want to trust in our leaders. We want to believe that our candidate can be the hero that can solve a lot of these problems. But I think more and more people are realizing not only will they not solve most of them, they may not solve any of them. I mean, so let's talk about, in the time we have left, let's talk about the UN, the big meeting this week. The General Assembly is this week, but this weekend they met in a summit in which all 193 member nations signed off on the Pact for the Future, or whatever it was called. What can you tell us about that?
Well, I just put out a quick little 60-second reel today on all of the social media networks because somebody had sent me over the weekend a reel that came off of Instagram for the UN. And it was this 30-second blip about now is the time and it's got to be global and we need to peace and security with all the phrasing. And I'm like, if this doesn't tell people that we have a one world system coming, I don't know what will. And so I believe they finalized something. There's a 56-page document now that's out, and I haven't had a chance to read it. And of course, it's basically just a bunch of jargon up until the last several pages that kind of outlines the details of what they're wanting to do. And I'm sure most of your listeners are aware of like the 17 sustainable development goals that they're working towards. That is the tribulation, folks. Like, look at that and see it. It's very clear to see that those kinds of things are going to be existing during that final 7 years. But just to what kills me about this is like no media outlet here in the US is reporting any of that. That no one even knows that they met in New York this week. No one knows. No one has a clue. Bible prophecy folks do. The people who are watching out for the New World Order, those folks do. But like no one really knows from sitting down watching the 5 o'clock news or the 6 o'clock news that this happened over the weekend and that these guys are out to propel this agenda forward as fastly as they can. And that to me is just mind blowing because again, JB, nobody's hiding anything that they're wanting to do anymore. It used to be like we'd hear certain verbiage and we'd go, that doesn't sit right. But now they just come out and just tell you what they're going to do, and it is just truly, it's fascinating to me. And it's also mind blowing at the same time because I'm going, Lord, how long do we really have here with all this stuff happening right now?
Yeah, I mean, I can't help but think that this particular, decision that came out over the weekend. And just to clarify for those who may not be aware, and by the way, Alex Newman has a great article that just came out yesterday that's all
Mm,
about it.
awesome.
But the UN members signed an agreement unanimously that and this is a summary. There are a lot of details that are, and the devil is in the details. You better believe that.
Hmm.
But in general, it's that the next time there's a global crisis, the member nations will cede control of their sovereignty to the UN to handle it, to orchestrate it, to lead the response to it. And, for so long, the UN, since it was formed coming out of World War II, has largely been all bark and very little bite. But of course, groups like the World Health Organization came out of the UN. And, we've seen moments where, for example, Trump in his first administration, he defunded the World Health Organization, to which we say a hearty amen, right? That's
That's right.
one of the good things that he did, and he did a lot of good things. But clearly, it's not based on principle or based on a broader worldview, or he would have dropped out of the UN altogether, because the UN has
Right.
largely been anti-Semitic. They've never really been a positive for us. What good does the UN for us? I mean, we get more out of NATO than we do the UN, and we don't get very much out of NATO anymore. So, I mean, what does that tell you? So I just feel like this decision has all the earmarks of a laying the foundation. It's almost like, what do they know that we don't, right? I
Yep.
mean, we understand the ostensible reason they did it. The official narrative is, hey, we just lived through this existential threat with the pandemic, which of course it wasn't really an existential threat, but that's the narrative. And so we want to be prepared next time for an organizational structure to tackle whatever the next crisis is, whether that's another pandemic or aliens landing on the White House lawn or some kind of a global conflagration. Who knows? So, that's their reasoning. But knowing what we know about the Luciferian elite and their plan, you can't help but think they're putting this place in place just in time for
Hmm.
whatever manufactured event comes next, so they can
Yep.
then exploit it. What do you think?
Yep. I agree with that wholeheartedly. Now, hopefully, the next event on the calendar is the Rapture, and that's why they have to get involved. That would be great. Then do what you got to do, right? Because we're gone, and then the Lord's going to handle the rest of it. But yes, that is exactly when I hear their verbiage. It's just, again, we know this. Again, if you study the Luciferian agenda, you know that they always tell you what they're going to do. They always let you know that's part of their. I want to say it's part of their, like, they have to do that. There's a reason that they believe they have to do that, and so they do. You can look back even over, my goodness, whenever the I call it the scamdemic of 2020 happened back in October of 2019. You had Agenda 201. That website is still up. You can go and read all about it, and every bit of that was lined out in that exercise that they did for that pandemic, right?
Yeah.
And so again, them doing this, I just go, man, what are these people planning? Because they do. They all sit around in their cigars filled rooms and talk about how they're going to overtake the world. And that's what they spend their time doing. So, seeing that this weekend, and then, the big concern for us is that, you hear a lot of people say, like, America is that last beacon of hope. Like, we're just like the city on a hill, if you will, out here. And then if they get our national sovereignty and they push something like what they did, then what's going to happen we don't have a say anymore. It was already hard enough in 2020 just to stand up. I mean, my husband and I got kicked out of stores, and we wouldn't back down on any of that stuff because we weren't willing to comply to any of it. So it's just like that's the kind of stuff that's hard for me because it's that whole "don't tread on me" just rises up in me. Like I'm ready to fight because that's this is all we have left here, right? And I don't want it taken from me.
Yeah. And they'll use, franchised tyranny again when whatever
Yeah.
comes next to pressure people into doing something, so they don't have to call in the troops. They can get the Walmart managers or the church pastors or the people at the local store to tell you where you can stand and what you have to wear and all of that, because it's pretty easy to dupe people, and you don't have to dupe everybody. You just have to dupe key people in key positions. But back to that UN pact, I mean, you'd like to think that any agreement is only as good as the ability to enforce it. And if the United States, let's say some global pandemic or some type of crisis happens, in that moment, if the US chose to say, we don't care about that pact, we don't care if we signed it or not, we're not going to go along with what you say because maybe the decision that the UN decides in that moment is wrong. Um, then that's fine. That'd be a proud moment. But I have no confidence that our
Yeah.
leaders will do that. I mean, because what'll happen is there's so many of the UN member nations that are completely blinded and completely controlled by the globalists that they'll just all come together and they'll shake their finger at the US and say, now you promised, you got to do this.
Mhm.
And by the way, if you don't, then we're going to consider you an enemy of the UN and we're going to come in and get you. So I don't know. It to me, it's got to be significant. Time will tell if it ever gets deployed, but all signs point to some type of crisis on U.S. soil potentially, sooner than later. I don't see us continuing boiling over here, without some major crisis anytime soon. So, well, let's tell folks how they can kind of follow you. We'll link up to it, but we'd love to hear a little bit more about where they can watch your show, and then any guests maybe that you have coming up, and sneak peek
Yeah.
at that.
Absolutely. So I would say the best place to find me is my YouTube channel, and that's Certainty for Uncertain Times. If you search it, you'll find it. I do have a newsletter on there, and that's my website, certaintyforuncertaintimes.com/newsletter. Should I ever get the old axe from YouTube, they'll be the first people to know about it because that is obviously a reality. I have to watch what I say on there. And then, yes, Lee Brainerd and I just, we recorded last week, I believe. Last week, again, time's all relative to me anymore, JB. So we did, and that's going to be out next week. We actually talked about Mystery Babylon, so that'll be really fun. I love talking about the fringe subject. So if some people don't follow me, I have done a couple of interviews. Mondo Gonzalez and I did an interview a while back talking about the Nephilim in Genesis 6. So I'm just into all of this stuff from every lens possible because it's truly just for me. All it's done is build my confidence with just Jesus. Like who I believe in and what he's coming to do. And I can't wait to see him come back and make everything right. But the best place definitely to find me is going to be YouTube. All my links are there to find me. I'm very active on Instagram, again, at least for now, unless, I get silenced by the tech overlords. But that's pretty much where people can find me mostly. And yeah, we'll see how God wants to expand this ministry from there.
Well, awesome. We've got Lee. I was just with Lee this weekend at a conference, and Mondo, by the way, and several other folks that I'm sure you know. And I've got Lee on next week. He's going to be talking about 10 potent proofs for the pre-tribulation rapture. But he's awesome. Just a dear friend. Both those guys are dear friends. And so, Lauren, thanks a bunch for your time. I really enjoy getting different perspectives and talking and strategizing and, just kind of brainstorming on what's going on. We don't have it all figured out. We don't claim to have it
Nope.
all figured out, but we know the one who does. And so stay in the word, folks. Stay rooted in God's word. Keep looking up for that blessed hope. And
Amen.
thanks again, Lauren, for being with us.
Thank you for having me, JB. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed that interview as much as I did getting to be on JB's show. And of course, obviously, you guys know I've had the opportunity to have JB on this channel twice already. I'll link those videos for you to see in case you've missed them. And of course, if you actually want to even see some teaching from JB, then you may already know this, but the Prophecy Watchers Conference is coming up in Branson, Missouri, December 5th, I believe. And if you're not going to be able to go, I'm attending. I'm so excited. I cannot wait to meet some of these teachers that have truly changed my life and get to see all of them in action on the platform. But if you're going to be watching at home in your pajamas, you can still do that. You can get tickets, and I do have a link for you down below that'll save you $5 off the ticket. And of course, you actually get to keep the trainings for 6 months of time. So it's a really good deal, and you can click the link down below and use the code Lauren24 and get $5 off your purchase. Now, my goal with that conference, since I'm going to be there live, is to do a little bit of vlogging. We'll see how that goes. I'm hoping to have a camera by then, so I'm not using my cell phone. We'll see how that goes, but that's my goal, so I can actually show you guys kind of what happens in real time at a prophecy conference. If you've never gotten to go to one, this is my first one, so I won't lie, I'm geeking out a whole lot, and I cannot wait for it. I'll keep you guys posted, and I'm so excited too, because 2 friends of mine are going that I, by the way, have never met in person, but we are meeting for the first time at the prophecy conference, and this is what I love so much about this community. I have gotten to connect with so many of you guys that honestly, without this technology piece that we know is going to serve the Antichrist later on, it is serving all of us right now, bringing the remnant together for such a time as this. And I am so excited about that and getting to meet so many more of you who are going to the conference in like the flesh in, of course, December. And with that, JB, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to come on your channel and talk about all this stuff. As I've mentioned in every video with you, you've personally personally changed my life so much and helped me to put so many of the puzzle pieces together that I didn't know how to put together back in the day when I was learning all of this from a secular lens. So thank you for the work that you have done and the amount of sacrifice that has gone into everything that you have done, along with probably the hardship on top of that for exposing the things that you do. We all appreciate you so very much. And to everybody else, thank you so much for watching this channel, for sharing videos, for liking, for commenting. You guys are the reason that this channel is growing the way that it is, and I appreciate it. And you know what? I'll tell you one other thing. If you're feeling a tug on your heart to start supporting this ministry and that's something that you want to do to help me put dollar bills to all the things that I need to keep this channel growing, you can do that down at the links below. And for those of you that have done so, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. You guys have no idea how timely some of the stuff that y'all are doing in order to help me grow, and some of the financial support that you guys are giving me to keep producing things on this channel has been. It's truly divine, and I appreciate it so much. So thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. Now, a couple of other ways that you can stay connected with me. I would say follow the Rumble channel that I have, just in case I ever get the from YouTube. I am pretty active on my Instagram. I now have a Telegram due to the good old censorship that happens on Instagram. And of course, most importantly, my most important avenue is going to be my newsletter, certaintyforuncertaintimes.com/newsletter. Link is below where all the links are. That is what you want to be on, because if all the things go down, that's the one place that I will be able to email out and let everybody know what is going on, where we've moved to, all of those things. And it's sad that we actually have to give you guys these instructions, but hey, that is the world that we are living in now. And last but certainly not least, if this is the first time you've watched a video on this channel and you're liking what you're seeing, then make sure to subscribe to this channel so that, again, you don't miss out on the things that are coming, where we discuss everything from current events, theology, to eschatology, and all the things in between. And with all of that said, I think we'll go ahead and wrap up this video. So until next time, keep your eyes on the sky and keep your ears listening for that shofar. I'll see you in the next one. Maranatha.